government, I believe, has a regime of safe harbor where on a little bit of self-regulation principle, e-com companies can comply and provide better safety nets to the buyers where, products which are spurious are pulled out of the system much ahead in time. We have China, which is kind of somewhere in between. It has a regulation which is, in the event of a violation of an intellectual property right, a consent has to be taken, which is neither here nor there. So there's a lot to be done in China. In India, I think we are still way off the mark. I was just trying to analyze the laws which get impacted in the case of counterfeit, and I came across something like 14 legislations. Your remedies are scattered across 14 legislations, and none of them was ever meant to address to e-com except for the Information Technology Act, which is closest to home on the subject. You have the Trademarks Act, the Copyright Act, you have general legislations like Indian Penal Code, Drugs and Cosmetics Act. You just name it, anything which impacts a product quality, that also gets impacted here. But e-com, the way the online transactions happen, there's a far more proactive coordination required amongst the stakeholders, which is typically the e-com platforms, the ISP, the industry, the branded items which are being sold. Some of the case in point could be the way some of these e-com platforms have responded, like eBay, for example. eBay has a verified owner rights program where it identifies the owners who have proper rights over the products they're putting up for sale. Alibaba, for example, has the Alibaba Protect program. Not only that, in fact, they have gone a step ahead. In certain jurisdictions, they've tied up with the local intellectual property offices. In Korea, for example, they've tied up with Korea IPO, and KIPO, and Alibaba is supposed to, under that MOU that they've signed up in 2014, they're supposed to proactively take actions internally to prevent misuse of the platform by people who are trying to pass off spurious products. I think these kind of initiatives need to be, some kind of a voluntary programs like this need to really come into day-to-day best practices for the Indian e-com companies. As much as the law is supposed to facilitate this, we definitely need a legislation which is focused at e-com to address, counterfeit products being sold, because it's not an issue merely between the buyer and the seller. The biggest sufferer is the buyer himself who's getting the wrong product, and of course the branded products which are being, allegedly branded products which are actually not genuine, which are being sold through the platforms. So I think somewhat I would like to also talk about this as we go along on the Q&A, but this is an area which we need to focus. From the government side, I think there is a dire need of some kind of understanding going beyond geographies, whether it's at a regional level, at ASEAN level, or SAARC level, or at a completely global level. But there has to be some minimum understanding of governments that a certain level of protection programs has to be made compulsory for e-com players cutting across geographical boundaries, because a buyer who needs a certain protection in Korea, the same buyer in India needs an equal protection, because invariably the products and the brands are the same. In fact, also just taking a minute more, I remember Alibaba also doing some program for Tmall, where they actually offered to very key select big brands to come on Tmall, which is one of their platforms, to actually provide a higher and more stringent self-regulation process to weed out spurious products being put on the platform. Now that was an incentive that they agreed to sign up big brands. Now this kind of best practices needs to come at a much wider scale amongst the e-com platform players in India as well. And of course, some kind of a government action to bring uniformity of the processes to prevent counterfeit. I think with this, I'll leave it here and also take up issues as we go along in the Q&A session.
Thank you. It's exciting to be in a, thank you Vitika for inviting me. It's exciting to be in an e-commerce conference. When your wife starts spending more time in browsing the products than spending with you, it's better you come sit down in a conference and talk. So as our fellow panelist rightly said, that the issues and the importance around e-commerce, like regarding IP in e-commerce or any startup per se, is yet to be well understood in Indian regime. So what I thought is to start with showing what other e-commerce company across the world, let's say top 4 e-commerce companies, top 4 e-commerce companies around the world are doing with respect to patents, and let's see the difference here in India. This which one? Okay, perfect. So if you see Amazon, if you see their patents, so these is so in the worldwide regime, if they are US origin, if you see the US patents, look at the number. They have around 4,500 US applications, and look at India, still not bad, 190, So overall, they have around 8,000 applications. So you know that this is some serious business. eBay, the second largest e-commerce across the world, US 3,500, India 40. Alibaba, if you see, they are China origin, 2,430 X. They just talk about how easily they can acquire customers or how quickly they can capture the market, instead of how different they are in terms of technology to Grofers or PepperTap or some of the others, similar startups. So if you start protecting your technology, then these replicas won't come. And if these replicas have to come, they have to come prepared, well prepared, and with better technology, or they have to take licenses from your tech on your patents. So if your competitors are successful, you end up getting more money, the revenue money. So that's the biggest thing. Now, everyone is exciting, especially in India, about funding, Now, when we are seeing a lot of FDI as well, there were so many discussion. Now, when it comes to foreign investors, IP is very important to them, especially when it comes to patent, trademark protection, copyright issues. They are very careful in evaluating any startup or any company, for that matter, with respect to how good your IP is, So when these companies, when you start expecting money from foreign venture, foreign funds, they may check your IP, So let me take some numbers. In US, for any funded company, 20% of all funded companies have a patent application before they are even funded once. That's a pretty high number, 20%. Around 35% startups, all funded startups, have at least one patent application. All those startups which are funded by big VCs, around 45% of them have patent applications, And if we talk about with respect to the funds, the funding arm of all big companies like Samsung Ventures, like Johnson & Johnson, like Motorola Ventures, their funded companies average around 80 to 90% of them have patents, Even Khosla Venture, Silicon Valley fund, they average around 70%, right? Even Sequoia, for that matter, and Excel Partners in the US average around 40%, right? So when things start getting serious, they will start getting serious on IP as well. So that's how important your IP is with respect to funding. Now moving on, all our prominent startups here, or now companies, Flipkart, Amazon, Snapdeal, Grofers, and some of the others, I'm sure at some point of time, they'll be either looking for merging or acquisition or maybe going to public, right, IPO. That would be their exit strategy, isn't it? So now, if any of these startups or companies in India, they plan to do IPO in the foreign soil, say Hong Kong, say US, they have to be, they have to think twice about their IP before actually doing that. Let me take again some examples. Any guesses, any one of you can guess how many patents do Facebook had just before they were planning for IPO? Any guesses, any numbers, any? Take some numbers, thousands, 500, you have some numbers here. Let me take the first one. 830, any other number? They should be 830, instead they were 12, So Facebook had only 12 patents. So what happened? During the IPO, you suddenly become vulnerable to these infringement cases. Everyone is eyeing on you that as soon as you plan for IPO, I'll start, sending you infringement notices. And guess what? Same thing happened. What happened? Facebook ended up buying from Microsoft AOL patents, 650 patents worth how much? 550 millions. That's round about more than $1 billion when you're trying to raise 5 billion or something. Twitter, any guesses? How many patents? 9. I was in Silicon Valley around that time when the IPO was happening for Twitter. Every second client of mine wanted to somehow map their patent portfolio to Twitter product. You know why? Because Twitter was vulnerable, They were into IPO, everyone wanted to sue them, right? Same thing happened with them. They bought 900 patents from IBM, so many litigation, and at the end of the day, whoever followed Twitter IPO, it wasn't as expected. It wasn't up to the mark. Google, 2004, they had a big Yahoo, patent litigation case against Yahoo. They had to settle that case before IPO. They gave them shares worth around $350 million. We all talk about Alibaba IPO. These are smart chaps. A year before they were planning to go IPO, they suddenly started building patents in US. They had around 300 patent and/or applications in the US to save them, to safeguard themselves. So in nutshell, what comes out? That at some point of time, even our startups, even our e-commerce companies or some of the other startups in other industries have to start giving more importance to trademark, copyright, and patent. So this gets very important. Now, some of the other benefits of focusing on patent or IP per se is that you motivate your employees. Each employee gets motivated to file a patent. So this way, disruption would happen, right? Your company or a startup would continuously evolving in terms of technology, and instead of one or two sharp guys evolving the technology, probably all of the employees will start doing that. So that's something good. Now let me discuss some of the challenges around patents, specifically software and business method patents. I'm sure most of you would know that there have always been a question mark in terms of whether a subject matter is specifically from software and business method side is patentable or not. And that's true in all countries, in all jurisdictions. Having said that, there are still ways to claim your technology. You can somehow link it with hardware. You can claim it in a way where you can show that it's transforming something, whether it's applicable to a machine. So there are ways to patent it. And one important piece of information, especially with respect to Indian patent laws, the section 3K of Indian patent law, which discusses or put rules around software and business method patent, there have been some serious discussion going on between the IT giants and the patent lawmakers, and the law around 3K is being relaxed, you know, so in years to come, you'll start seeing...
What else is left to say about this? So, you know, what I want to do is kind of try and put together in a nutshell what the three speakers before me, you know, were trying to put across. And primarily, it is to do with whether you're looking at intellectual property from the point of view of protection or from the point of view of non-infringement. So, from your own protection strategy point of view, sometimes both go hand in hand, but sometimes from your own protection strategy point of view, it is extremely important, as a prior speaker said, that you must, from the word go, if it is extremely important for you to get funding, it's extremely important for you to set up a company, set up an entity, get your you know, your TAN numbers and all that stuff. I think intellectual property protection has to be part of the DNA of the company. It has to be one of the checklist boxes that you must tick before you really embark upon your business. It is not necessary or absolutely essential that you may have something which is protectable. You definitely will have a trademark. You possibly would have an application which may be slightly different from whatever is already out there. You need to ask the question with the relevant experts at that time, is this patentable? If it is not, if it's not patentable in India, is it patentable overseas? Am I looking at that horizon of going global in a certain period of time? If I am, I must look at that option of filing in the relevant jurisdictions also. And thankfully, we do have a system of the PCT. So if it is something which is patentable in India, from the date that you file in India, you have a period of 12 months within which you can put in an application in the Indian Patent Office, which then goes to the central repository in Geneva with the WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization. You mentioned the list of the countries where you're desirous of actually going and filing your application subsequently. And you have another 18 to 19 months, so a total of 30, 31 months, 2.5 years, fairly long period of time in the e-commerce space, for you to actually go and file in those countries. And guess what? When you go and file in those countries, you get the priority date of your date of application in India. It's a huge plus on priority. So if you plan in advance, if you think you have something that will work not only in the country but also overseas, there is this tool available to you, and you will probably incur a fraction of the cost, at least for that 2.5 years, to preserve that priority. You may decide after that 2.5 years that you don't want to actually go and register your patents in those countries. You may decide that you want to pick and choose some of those only, but at least that option is still there. That's important. Again, with trademarks, you file in India, you not only have a 6-month period in which to go and file in the convention countries and preserving the priority of that date of application in India, but you also now have the option under what's called the Madrid Protocol to simultaneously file in multiple jurisdictions through the Indian Trademark Office itself. So these are important points to remember if you are thinking globally. Now, it's very possible that you have a strategy.
Clearly, you have to draw a balance as to how much due diligence you want to do. But does the Indian law require an affirmative duty of the intermediary to do any kind of due diligence to figure out whether the content is infringing before placing it?
No, it does not mandate requirement of a prior due diligence before you actually put the product on your website or your portal. But in the event that you do receive a notice to that extent, you will have to show that you've taken action pretty quickly. So what has started happening, for example, in the case of, let's say, the film industry, is that prior to release of any film, because of the fact that they've started seeing that there is this entire, there is a select band of certain websites which are almost invariably putting out those pirated prints online. So what we've fashioned the type of relief that we are looking for in going to courts in advance. So there is a movie about to be released, let's say next Friday. We will perhaps at least 10 to 15 days before that file a case in the relevant court, make all those websites, parties that have got a history of actually infringing, putting out that pirated content. We also make the top ISPs parties to these proceedings, as well as the top mobile internet operators, because they also facilitate the process of actual access to that pirated content. And in certain cases, even the DOT, where we seek not only an injunction order against those websites, plus certain other unnamed people who we term as John Does, or the Indian version, the Ashok Kumars. And we also ask for an affirmative order in advance to these ISPs and the mobile companies, that in the event that we get to know that there is some website which is actually showing this content which is not part of these array of parties specifically named, then within 48 hours they will block access to that.
I see.
So to that extent, I think intellectual property owners have stepped up the ante in saying that even I'm not going to wait for my product or my service, whatever, to be infringed. I'm going to take the action up front.
Right. I see. If just from the US standpoint, this is an issue that is relatively well settled. The issue of ISP liability, there is a safe harbor under the DMCA, which is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in the US. And basically, there are certain best practices that, if an intermediary follows those best practices, then that really mitigates the potential for liability on the intermediary, such as, having appropriate terms of use, clear terms of use conspicuously posted on the website, providing for notice and takedown mechanisms, and also using some kind of filters, proactively using filters to detect infringing content so that you can remove it or block it.
So I think the terms of use and privacy and the policy to have an intellectual property in place, I think that's also important, even though not really enforceable specifically by any particular provision. But I think because of the fact that people are aware of what's happening overseas and they want to imbibe those best practices in India, it is usually being followed here. But typically the obligation stems in legally only when you get the notice, and if you fail to act within that certain period of time, that's when the liability will attach.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? I think we have several.
Hi. One of the challenges that we are facing now is that in e-commerce platform, there is a domain name on which the website is hosted, through which the business is carried on. But what happens is that it is not possible for me to, or as an in-house legal counsel, to register each and every variation of that domain name and to protect my trademark, which probably may or may not compromise my domain name. So for example, let's say if I take Grofers, so I may be sitting in Gurgaon and somebody in Delhi may be infringing my domain name by using it or adding a single G or double R to Grofers and getting it registered. So since we do not have a domain policy or a specific act which caters to domain disputes, how would you recommend, or unless I file a domain complaint with the UDRP or NICSI to get it blocked, what do you think is the solution for us to protect our domain names and its various variations?
I think we're probably mixing up two issues here. We're mixing up the trademark issue, and we're mixing up the platform that we create for selling the products. I think on the trademark side, I'm sure colleagues will agree here, we have actions available for names which are deceptively similar, if you just replace a spelling here or there. And there could be derivative protections available from that, where you can even protect such deceptive domain names also coming up, which ultimately affect your capability to protect your trademark, because a relief you have directly under the law that cannot be denied by an indirect action by creating domain names, and that way you could get a direct recourse from the court for an immediate injunctive relief against any such brand coming in. Yes, because of the absence of a policy, as I mentioned, because of the absence of a very clear policy or a law focusing on e-com, there are issues that we have to run after 13 or 14 different acts, including if it is a premeditated action and somebody does it repetitively against you, you could even go to the extent of a criminal action, where it is being done with an intent to actually do certain things which are offenses under the Indian Penal Code. Now that would depend on the degree of, how, what's the quantum and what's the nature of the infringement that is happening. But at the moment, yes, we don't have a composite policy, and therefore we have to borrow reliefs from different acts, including from, civil law in that sense, for compensatory as well. In case some water has already flown and you have suffered damages, you could have recourse even to recover your losses. So reliefs are available, but they are slightly fragmented here.
So, sir, do you think in the upcoming national IPR policy, do you see any protection on that angle?
So there is a lot of discussion on this, but till the policy comes out and we see the letter of the word, and again, we can take the leaves from other laws which have come out. The Companies Act took almost nearly 2 decades to come out, and even after coming out, 50% of it is still not effective. Competition law took decades to become a reality. So similarly, even on the IP regime, lawmaking is definitely a little retarded. Where somebody was mentioning a little while ago, the makers of the law probably think in a different language and write in a different language, or possibly there's not enough interface amongst the stakeholders. Because actually when the law is being made, the people sitting in this room should be the ones who should be giving the inputs. But that doesn't happen. So we'll have to wait and see what really comes out and then take up the issue from there as well.